was pursuing something different language, different culture, different food.
What was it like to integrate into Chinese culture?
That is a big misconception, actually. In China in general, the boss culture is a big thing. The boss is the top priority. The way we socialize is completely different to the way they do here in China.
Where you're coming from culturally and where you are kind of on the extreme ends both ways.
That was a bit of a shock to me.
You said that you were from Venezuela.
Correct, yeah. I'm originally
And is
from
that where you
Venezuela.
grew up as well?
Yeah, I was born in Venezuela and I lived there until like I was 26, 25, 26 years old. I moved out. So yeah, but I before that I was going to the States often for work. I was working there in summer camps like for 3 years. Then I went to do some like training for my career in San Francisco. And yeah, so I've been back and forth for the first half of my 20s. Then I moved to China, where I live currently.
Okay, so your first international experience was going between Venezuela and the States.
Yeah, but originally it was when I was 20 years old. I started going to the States during summertime, spent my whole summer there working. It was in Virginia.
Wow, okay. And also California. You said you did something in San Francisco?
Correct, yeah. For the first three, from 2008 to 2011, I was going to Virginia, and then 2011, I moved for almost a year in San Francisco, in California. It was a very nice experience, also for a training, because I graduated in 2010. Then I went there for a kind of like an internship for a hotel. I studied hotel management originally. And I was working for an Intercontinental in San Francisco. It was a very nice experience, a very nice city. Really had good memories of the States.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people that move from Latin America up farther north to the U.S. or here in Canada for some economic opportunities. But you're saying that after that, you moved to China?
Yeah, actually, after finishing my internship, I went back to Venezuela like for a year, I think. And then I got this opportunity. No, before actually, I went to Dominican Republic because I had an opportunity to work there. But I didn't get used to, like, it was too similar to Venezuela in many ways. I was pursuing something different and like different language, different culture, different food. And I was applying and looking for a job in Middle East, in like Dubai and Qatar, Abu Dhabi, this area, and also in China. And the first offer that I got was from China. So like, why not? Let's just take it. And then I just came here, and it was originally for like a year, but it's been already almost 10 years, and I'm still here, and I'm still loving it, and still having a great time in this country.
Wow, 10 years. So you were like specifically looking for something different.
Yeah, that was the main purpose for me in that time. Like, 10 years ago, when you're younger, and like there's no attachment to anybody or anything, you feel like free, and you want to experiment different things and go to places and learn languages and meet people. So that was the main purpose. I've always liked traveling, actually. That was something that since I was a kid was calling for me. Like, I really want to go to places. I really want to discover countries. I want to meet new people. And in that time, I had this opportunity. Actually, that's one of the reasons I studied hotel management. In that time, I knew that was something that could let me maybe have the experience to live in another country and do something different. So that's why I studied that, and I feel like, sure, like, why not? Let's just do it. Perhaps that's something I wouldn't do right now. Like, I'm looking for more stability, and that's something I found here. But in that time, that seemed like the right thing to do. So I just took the chance, and I do not regret it at all. I think it's been an awesome experience working and living in this country.
So what city did you move to originally in China?
It's a city called Shenzhen. It's the third largest city in China by GDP. It's right next to Hong Kong. It's not that well known for some people, but it's getting there. I think it's doing a great job to position itself in the global stage. There are a lot of things happening right now. There are like big companies have their headquarters here, like Huawei. DJI, the drone maker, was born here in Shenzhen. The headquarters are here. So it's a city focused a lot in technology. And that's something I really liked it because I'm a technology lover. I really like all about gadgets and tech and cars and innovation, infrastructure. So I think it's a good city to live in. As I say, it's just right next to Hong Kong. Like literally takes me 15 minutes by high-speed train to reach Hong Kong, like the central part.
Oh wow.
And yeah, so it's a very good place. It's not as expensive as Hong Kong, but you have like a lot of international visitors, a lot of expats living in this city as well. But at the same time, you are in touch with China itself. So that's something I really liked it. The mix of like international environment with the local culture is something you find here, and that's something that attracts me a lot from Shenzhen.
And is that something that's unique to that city? Like when I think about China, maybe it's my own preconceived notions, but I don't think of it as being a very diverse country. Like it doesn't seem like they have the same levels of immigration that we see here in the West. But maybe that's not true. I don't know. Is it an international place in general?
I mean, not at the levels that you can find, for example, in Europe or in North America, where you have a lot of people from all kind of backgrounds, different countries, religions, languages. It's different. Definitely is not at that level. The thing is, China, like usually you have the perception, the conception of the typical Chinese person, like the way they look. But China, when it comes to culture, is pretty diverse. Like if you go to the borders of the country, north, south, east, and west, they all have totally different cultures, even languages. Like all around China, everybody can speak Mandarin, but every single province and every single town have their own local dialect, for example. Same happens with the food. And if you go farther, for example, to northern China, there are like many towns where they only speak Russian, but they're still part of China. If you go to, for example, to the westernmost part of China, like the part borders Myanmar and Thailand, they have this language also that is very similar to Thai. Same with the borders with North Korea. They speak Korean over there. So it's pretty broad, the local culture. When it comes to immigration, yeah, it's way less because I would say the restrictions that you have to live in China or the steps you need to go through to settle in China are way tougher than in the West. So, for example, you definitely need a visa to stay here and live in here. You cannot be here without a residence permit. You can visit, like some countries recently, they stopped the visa request so they can enter China for up to 15 days, like some European countries. But that's like a exception. It's going to be until 2025. But if you want to live here, the system here has a way to know whoever enters leaves the country, and if you're not here, there's always a way to, like, you need to provide information of your hotel where you're staying. So it's not as easy. Like I would say, okay, I want to stay there, and then later I'll figure out how to, settle my status in a legal way. That doesn't happen here. Is way more difficult. So these many people see perhaps as an obstacle to move to China and settle here. So you need to do it in a proper way. Also, to find a job here, you are supposed to have like a degree or some experience on your field. So you can come here as a student, for example, and then you graduate. The possibility or the chances for you to graduate and instantly find a job in China are very limited, because one of the requests for you to find a job in China is to have 2 years experience on your field, but you don't have that experience because you just graduated. So that means you need to go back to your country or another place to work first, got the experience, and then come back and then apply for a job, and then you have your like working visa, residence permit. So that's usually the way it is. So all these things together perhaps limit a little bit the fact that more people can move here and make it more international. However, because the international community perhaps is not that big, it's kind of common that we kind of know each other. Like we know who, or I've heard of you, or we have friends in common. So the expat community, we kind of see each other at some point in the city, because there are also some areas in the city where most of these people live, and then some areas where you find most of the international restaurants and or the nightclubs, the bars. So we tend to see each other somehow or have some connection with each other. It's not as big, but I think it's growing. It's growing more and more. I think China also, they're doing after the COVID period, because the restriction here were for about 3 years. That was the longest restriction period like in that any other country. And after that, they're trying to open up the country a little bit more and attract more foreign investors and foreign labor force, skilled labor force to come to China, even travelers. That's why they stopped the requesting the visa for some countries. So they're doing some efforts to change this thing, and then more people from more countries can visit China.
You mentioned that like it's hard to get a job straight out of university because even with an entry level position, they want you to have a couple of years of experience. How do Chinese people do that? Like
Oh, that
locals?
does not apply for Chinese people. That's only a request for you to apply for a working visa. The
Ah,
process to apply for a working visa is that you need to prove that you have this working experience. They request for some recommendation letters from your previous employee, and then you need to like prove that you actually have this experience. It's 2 years. For local people, that's not an issue. Actually, they have a lot of incentives for like recent graduates to like a lot of internships and trainings that for them count as experience. So that's another story. But for expats who want to live or work in China, that's a must. That's something they need to have.
it's for the visa process, not just for anyone.
Correct, because also you want, like as I say, the main focus to hire foreigners in China is to have somebody with certain specific skill. So you wouldn't find a job here working for a McDonald's, for example, as an expat. You wouldn't find a job as a driver, as a taxi driver, for example, for many reasons. First, they want somebody who has skill, and second, the language barrier. Like people here, everybody speaks Mandarin, and the part of the population who actually speaks English is very limited, maybe just in big cities and or in big companies perhaps, but not everybody can speak English here, so that's an issue. So yeah, that makes it like tougher for some people to find job and live and settle here.
Does that mean that you speak Mandarin as well? Did you have to learn it?
Yeah, in the beginning, like, well, right now we have a lot of tools. So in the beginning, or whoever comes here, you always have the Google Translator, Baidu Translate, like all these apps that helps you to communicate. But eventually, throughout the time, I started learning more Mandarin. Uh, I'm still in that process, to be honest. I don't speak Mandarin that fluent. Like for socializing and basic communication, I can perfectly understand and communicate. But something more precise, it's a little bit tougher. Actually, I just started taking classes again in the university. I'm going from Monday to Friday, the whole morning, trying to level up my Chinese and reach a better level.
So, like, at what point in the 10 years did you really dive into the language? Or was that something that, like, you had on your mind from the beginning? Or, like, how did that process turn out?
It was my goal, but to be honest, I never put the effort that I should have put on it. Like I was using these apps to learn my own, and I was asking my colleagues at some periods of my free time. I was just like taking notes and using what's this app called? It's not Duolingo. it's another app using your computer and you interact and they can like check your voice. So I was using these kind of tools once in a while, but not that I was not that serious about it. Because I also felt like I didn't really need it. As I say, if you need to communicate for basic things, you use your translator. My friends were all expats, so we were all communicating either in Spanish or in English. And my work was in English as well, so it was like my colleagues, big part of them could speak English because I was working for a hotel when I first came here, and it was just fine. So it was comfortable. I didn't really feel any pressure from any side. But eventually, I started getting more interested in it, and I guess all these things, these little steps I was taking, helped me to improve somehow. But now I want to like get a better level. Now I'm working as a content creator. I have a YouTube channel. I also have several channels in the Chinese platforms making content in English. I'm some of them in Chinese, like kind of silly videos. But I want to try to make more content in Chinese. So that's why also I want to kind of improve my level of Chinese. That's why I'm going to school now. But yeah, I think it will take perhaps 1 or 2 more years to reach the level that I really want. Like studying every day because Chinese is super hard language. It's really difficult language to learn, but it's not impossible. I have a lot of friends who can speak super fluently Chinese, and it's so amazing to see them giving speeches at events or talking in that fluent way or making videos in Chinese. And it was like, oh, I really admire that ability. I don't have excuse like for me not to speak that fluent. Perhaps I will say I've been lazy. I've been focused in other kind of things, but it's never late to keep doing it and improve it.
I mean, Mandarin has a reputation as being a very difficult language, and you said it is quite challenging. What would you say is like the hardest aspect of it linguistically?
I would say all of it, the whole thing. Actually, if you compare with other languages, like for example Spanish or French or Italian, grammar is not that complicated. I would say grammar in Spanish is way more complicated. It's more tricky. But then you have other aspects of Mandarin. First, the pronunciation. Mandarin is a tonal language. So with other language, no matter the way you use your tones, people will understand. It's more about the pronunciation or the way you use some vowels or some letters. But in Mandarin, it's all about the tones. And that's, I would say, is the main key point. Like, for example, I have right now in my class some people who have studied Mandarin for like 4 or 5 years, but they have studied it. That means they've been like following the process. They can identify characters, for example, but when it comes to tones or in pronunciation, they are not that good. For example, like that's something that my teacher have told me. Like the way I use the tones and the pronunciation is more accurate. It's more similar to the way a local person would do, a native speaker. And that's because I've been exposed to people here. I've been talking to them, and I kind of catch. I can not say which tones is this, but I pronounce it in the right way naturally. But these people have been studying the language for a long period of time. Perhaps it's not as easy for them because they've just been focused on the structure of a language rather than the practical way to use it. So that is a big difference. So at this point, for me, the tones are way easier, and that's because what I just said, I've been exposed to the culture and the language. But when you start studying, especially for Westerners, we are not used to tones. For example, I is wo, but if you say wo, people don't understand what you mean. But if you say wo, it must be wo. That way, it's like a curve in the pronunciation. So these kind of things happen to every single word, every single character, right? The tones. The second thing I would say is the characters. Like we use our regular alphabet for learning every other language, but here they use characters. They have a bridge between the characters and the way we use languages. It's called pinyin, and that's the way that you kind of understand characters. But local people do not use pinyin at all. So if you show them something in pinyin, they'll be like, "What is that? I don't understand for them it's like you're showing English. That is a tool for people to learn Chinese, but it's not a way to communicate. For example, to type on the phone, people use pinyin, but since these keywords are becoming like more and more accurate and faster, so you just input the first two letters of the pinyin, and then you probably just have the character right away, so it's easier to type and communicate. But yeah, tones, pronunciation, characters, and the way you need, because it's not the same when you hand write a character the same way you type it. So I cannot write any character like hand write. It's another level, another thing. But type I can. Reading is another part because you need to recognize characters. There's like so many, like for basic language, I think you need like 2,500 characters. And there are so many who are very similar between them. So you just see two of them, it's like, which one is this? So it's just like a little stroke or a little dot or a little line. That's the only difference. But it's hard to recognize all of them. So like I think Mandarin or Chinese in general has so many levels and so many layers and so many parts of the language that you need to learn separately. It's like each part is a different language. So pronunciation is one way because, like I say, Spanish, perhaps you see a word, casa. For you, casa, you write it, you read it, you memorize it. But here is like one thing is the pronunciation, the tone, the character, the pinyin, also like how to write it down without letters. So it's different levels of the same language, which makes it challenging, very challenging to learn, I would say.
Yeah, because if you're learning a language that uses an alphabet and uses a shared alphabet with your native language, it's not that hard to figure out the written part. Like for an English speaker, they can essentially read Spanish already, right? They could sound out the words, and yeah, there's some like outliers. There's some letters that are different, like the what is it? The enye. Is it enye? Is that what it's called? The letter?
Enye, right? Yeah.
That we would maybe mispronounce or probably would mispronounce, but you have a rough idea. With a language like Mandarin, there is no spelling words out, right? Like each character is a meaning in and of itself, and then in combination with other characters becomes different words, right?
Correct. That's the way it works. So
it's not sounding it out vowel per vowel or something like that.
No, that's right. Once you get to know some characters, it's easier. Also, I think for me at this point, because I can recognize characters, like not all of them, but I will say I can recognize a fair amount of characters. At this point, that's where you start learning more vocabulary. So it's like, oh, I know this character, and then you put with another one that it means another thing. So you can form some words. So yeah, you're right. In that matter, Mandarin works like that. But it takes some time to get used to or recognize or memorize a character when you say it.
Yeah, because if you're not familiar with the character, you'd have no basis to guess how it's pronounced, right? Or even the meaning, probably.
Correct. There are some clues, like it's called the radicals. That is the part of a character that kind of gives you a clue what it could mean or what could be the pronunciation somehow. But for that matter, you need to study the structure of a character that has a meaning, because some characters, for example, this is a language for like thousands of years ago. So originally what they did is use some like figures and some strokes to kind of identify something. Like fire, for example, fire, the character kind of resembles like a flame. 闭嘴啊. It's my the virtual assistant over there.
Chinese Siri is talking.
Yeah, it was the TV has embedded like this voice assistant, and it only recognizes Chinese, but I guess we say something that perhaps she thinks is in Chinese, and she like responded. So the character fire is resembles the flame of a fire. So when you say it, you kind of connect it to that. And in the same way, many other characters you can connect to the action or what it resembles, what it means, and you can use it as a clue to memorize it. But many others has not relation at all. There's no way to connect it, especially the words that you need two characters to form a word is something new, so you don't know.
Like some of them maybe look like images, but like you're saying, a lot of them don't, right? Because I've heard lots of people, like foreigners, like people that don't speak a Chinese language, say, "Oh, like Chinese, the characters are just drawing what the item is," and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. Like there's way too many items to be drawing them. Like that doesn't seem like it would be accurate.
Yeah, that is true. Like I would say for 2 or 3% of the characters. There is a very small amount that could happen for that, and actually it mostly happens to this part of the character, just part of it, which are called the radicals. So it doesn't happen to all of them. So it's not a rule. That's something that you say, oh yeah, I can kind of connect it to the form, the object, or the action that it says it is, and it's easier to memorize. But as I say, most of the words need 2 or 3 characters to say something. So it's a way to do it. What it's probably helps a little bit. It's the way they form the words. For example, computer is 电脑. 电脑 means 电 means electricity, now means brain. So
Oh,
computer means electric brain. Phone is 手机. 手机 shou means hand, ji it's machine. So phone is machine for the phone, for the hand, or like a
okay.
phone machine or a hand machine. So that way could be helpful to connect a little bit the meaning of some words. Especially when it comes to like technology or new objects and new things, is a way to connect it like that. But the characters itself does not resemble like a hand or a brain per se. But this could be a clue for you to memorize. Oh, I know, like, and then if you learn, for example, phone, 手机, then you already know 3 words. You know phone, you know show, which is hands, and you know ji, which is machine. So that way you can like provide extra feedbacks when you're learning the language. So the more you learn, I guess the easier it becomes. So
Mm.
I
Mhm.
have that hope right now, to be honest. Like I'm taking classes after like not actually going for school for a long time. But since I have a base, like I would say a pretty solid base of Mandarin, then it becomes easier for me to recognize characters because I know a lot of them, but I don't know the words. So I'm learning new things, or the way to connect the characters I already knew before. That together means something else, but I already know, so it could help to improve my vocabulary. So that again, that's my hope. Like I just started actually last week my classes, so I'm enjoying it a lot, and I feel a little bit excited and also relieved somehow when I grab the textbook and I start reading something and I recognize 70% of the characters. Of course, this is a text for students. They're not going to use something extremely difficult. But the fact that I can recognize 60, 70% of the characters, for me, that's a relief. So what I need to focus is in the new vocabulary and the way they form these words and perhaps a little bit of the structure of these new phrases. So yeah, I'm still on the way to get there, and but yeah, it's challenging. Like you could say, for me, it's been taking 10 years to learn a language.
Yeah, that's quite an undertaking to learn fluent Mandarin Chinese, I can imagine, especially if you're not speaking a language that is similar at all, right? What is the language that you use most frequently in your day-to-day life?
Here in China, I will say half and half between English and Chinese. Because for my work, what I'm doing right now, I communicate most of the time in English. However, I'm trying to like ask my colleagues to let's try to use at some point of the day only Chinese, communicate more in Chinese. Or also we communicate a lot through WeChat, which is the local app like the WhatsApp here. Try to communicate in Chinese, so I try to send message in Chinese. And I have some colleagues who don't speak English at all, so I try to spend more time with them. So it's like I'm pushing myself to use more and more Mandarin. But for practical things or for like most important parts of my work, I need to use English. So I would say 50-50. And of course, yeah, I have friends I speak Spanish with them, or like my family on the phone is all in Spanish. But that's a minor portion of my communication. But most of it is like either Mandarin and English. I hope it can become like a 80% Mandarin very soon. I'm working on that, but yeah, right now it's 50-50, I would say.
So, apart from the language, what was it like to integrate into Chinese culture? I mean, you've been there for 10 years now. That's a huge amount of time. I'm imagining that where you are now is probably very different than how you felt when you first arrived there, like day one.
Yeah, well, I guess it in a bit way it depends of the personality of each individual. Like I consider myself a very open person when it comes to culture and habits and many things that are related to a country or the way people behave. That is something really important. For instance, I have friends who've been here for like a year. They couldn't adapt at all. They couldn't accept the way perhaps some people behave or the way they do things, and they just leave. For me, it'll take a little bit of that openness I'm talking about, and also the patience to understand and accept things, because that's true. We are different. Like we are more similar. You find more similarities, of course, between a European or any person from any European country and North America and Latin America. We're more similar among us rather than Asian people, and especially Chinese people. So it took that uh, openness of mind. I like try to understand, accept, and see like, hey, I'm a visitor here. I need to adapt myself. I cannot pretend that they adapt the way they do things to my way. And that's also another common mistake to foreigners who will live here. Like people sometimes come here pretending like, no, this is not right. You need to change that. You cannot do that. And that's something you can't do here. And actually, they are very protective of their own habits and their own ways, especially when these type of people who come to aggressively try to change things, and that happens quite often, actually. But if you're not like that, if you have a major thing for every culture, which is respect, if I think it's easier, right? Yes, in the beginning, it took some patience and some understanding of many processes and many ways to do things, especially for work, because I mainly came here for work. So I was working, for example, in San Francisco before for this hotel, or in Venezuela for other hotels, and then I came here, and the processes are a little bit different than in the West. For example, in the West, in a hotel, the guest is a priority, right? That's the main thing. Here, yes, I guess it's important, but I think because in China in general, the boss culture is a big thing. The boss is the top priority. So I need to fulfill my boss's expectations rather than the guest's expectations. So there is a procedure that I need to follow. I cannot jump that procedure. I need to follow the procedure from A to C. I need to go A, B, C. In the West, for example, it might be allowed to jump the B. I mean, go from A to C if the guest requests that, or if it's for the benefit of the guest, but I will not harm the company. I can do that. Here in China, if you know you will not harm the company, you will benefit the guest, you might even benefit the company, you can jump from A to C, but people will not do that, no matter what, because it should be A, B, C. So people follow rules, people follow procedures, no matter what. That's the main thing. And unless your boss tells you you can jump from A to C, unless that happens, people will not do that. So that was a big of a shock for me, because I was used to like, hey, we need to do things to please the guests and make their experience something nice, unforgettable, so they can come back or they can recommend us. That's the way it works. That's the way businesses works in the West. But here is not like that. Here is about procedures. So that's one of the examples that I had to face when I first moved here. It was a little bit difficult. Throughout the time, I've been checking myself, and I found myself more doing things more in the Chinese way. So it's just crazy. Like when there's something to do, I need to follow steps A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's the way to do it. So I'm becoming more like that. But I found that is beneficial for me. First, because I live in a culture where that's the right way to do things. That's the way people do things. So it's okay for me to do that. The problem comes like if I ever decide to move to another place, perhaps it's going to be an issue. Another thing that was kind of difficult, it comes to socializing or relationship wise. I'm Latino. You have, I guess, a lot of Latino friends. You say your girlfriend was from Colombia. You know, like we are very passionate people. We're very affectionate people. We like hugs. We socialize in a different way. We make friends in a different way. Here is totally the opposite. Uh, Unless you become really good friends, people here tend to be more distant and a little bit cold in the first instance when you meet someone. So, for example, at work, um, in my country or anywhere else, the first thing you do is greet your colleagues. You say good morning, hello, how are you, how was your day? That's the right thing to do. Here it's not like that. You come to your workplace, nobody says a word. They just go straight to the work. You start socializing and interacting perhaps after a while. Like something happened, you need to ask something to your colleague related to work that could lead to a conversation and socialize, or maybe during the lunch break or do something out of work. But when you first come to work, it was a bit of a shock because I said like I say good morning and some people could reply, but that's not the rule. Sometimes people just like focus on their computer, nobody say anything. And I was like, oh my gosh, where have come from? Where am I? What is this? That was a bit of a
Uh,
shock to me. And same with friends and to go out. That's perhaps the reason why I also started creating a circle of friends who are probably more Westerners, more international, more similar to my culture or my background. But again, throughout the time, you start learning the way they behave. You start making more local friends, and that helps. That helps. But I still maintain my version that the level of friendship here in China compared to our way to relate to each other is not the same. Here, still more distant, a little bit more cold. Even though you're your best friends, your good friends, is a different way rather than for us. Like sometimes I go out for dinner with my Chinese friends. I will say 80% of the time, the people are just checking their phones rather than us. We do it a lot too, but I found like when I with my Venezuelan or Colombian or Latino friends, we can talk for 3 or 4 hours. We might check our phone if we receive a message, we reply, we just put it back. We are mostly interact with each other. But here is like all the time. Actually, they have a funny way to greet each other. Like usually, if you haven't met a friend for a long time, you say, "Hey, long time no see." Like, 好久不见, long time no see. But now they're changing. Oh, lang is. I mean, they say it in Chinese, but the way to translate is like, "Oh, it's been a long time. We haven't met each other to check our phones." Because usually what they do most of the time is just check their phones, and it's really funny because if you go to a restaurant, you see like a lot of couples, you don't see that level of communication that couples might have in the West. It's the same way you see they're all just checking their phones or they're in silent, they're just looking around. They might casually have a conversation, but it's not the same way that we do. The way we socialize is completely different to the way they do here in China. So that is, I could say, it's a wall a little bit for the integration of the culture because they do things in different ways. They relate to each other in a different way.
well, and I can imagine that Venezuelan culture and Chinese culture are probably on two ends of the spectrum. They're kind of on two extremes as well, right? Like as a Canadian, I don't necessarily consider Canadians to be overly reserved, but going to Colombia, I was definitely seen as more reserved. Like people were much more outgoing, much more, like you said, affectionate, like physically. Everyone is hugging and kissing on the cheek to greet. And, you know, you mentioned not greeting people in the morning in China, but of course in Colombia, greeting, and I'm assuming in Venezuela, greeting is a very big deal. Saying hi to people at a party, you need to go around one by one and make sure that everyone knows that, who you are if you haven't met them before, or introducing who you're with. And then the same thing happens when you leave the party. You have to make sure that you go and say goodbye to everyone. So you're giving like 20 people kisses. You're just walking around the room, ciao, ciao, ciao,
That's
saying
okay,
goodbye to
yeah.
everybody. And that was kind of a culture shock for me as a Canadian, where I was like, man, we got to do this every time. Like, can I just go like this? See you guys, bye. No, you have to go individually to every person. So it seems like where you're coming from culturally and where you are kind of on the extreme ends both ways.
Yeah, totally. It's a huge difference when it comes to that part. And actually, right now, as I say, it's been a long time I've spent here in China. I feel that I've been becoming a little bit of a Chinese because actually every time I go home, and my family and my parents and my friends tell me like I've become more distant and more like cold. I still do, of course, all this ritual of kissing and hugging, but for me, it's just like a first time thing. Like for example, when I was a kid, when I was younger, I was living in Venezuela. I'm pretty close to my cousins, and it's normal like to sit next to each other, maybe just hug for no reason, like just talk. Oh yeah, and just talking and share some thoughts and experiences and talk. When I go back home now, I first greet my family, my cousins, my aunts, because I also like every Latino family. We're a huge family, so the greeting process takes some time, but that's it. Later on, if I sit down in the living room to start talking about whatever, and then somebody comes too close to me, I feel like okay, I feel like it's too much. I don't know what happens. I don't know if I got to use it. I've changed. I don't know what's the deal, what's behind this thing, but I've noticed that, and they've noticed that too. Like perhaps I've become more indifferent, more less affectionate, I guess, and I think it's because of cultural integration, or I don't know. I become more like that. I get used to that, and they have told me that, and I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but at least for me it works. Because something that also happened to me in the beginning because of this cultural shock of being in a culture is more distant, more cold, less affectionate. I was feeling sometimes a little bit bad. I was feeling sometimes a bit lonely. I was feeling a little bit like I was not belonging here. Like why if I go out with some friends treat me like that? Why I feel like I'm not in my place, and that was something normal as part of the process. So I guess I had to adapt and change in order to survive. If I wouldn't accept it, if I wouldn't have changed, perhaps I was not here. I would not here at this day. But yeah, I feel like I had to adapt to feel better, to survive, and to do what I'm doing right now. It's part of the process, and I'm actually very thankful for that. And something I explain to my friends a lot is that I believe I'm trying to make a balance between that emotional part, because I also believe Latinos we're a little bit too emotional. So that leads sometimes in relationships to too much drama. I don't know if you've lived that, if you've been there, but the fact that we are that emotional creates a lot of, how to put it, like perhaps a lot of issues in many ways. Like perhaps we're more jealous, we're more possessive, and sometimes we say or do things following our emotions. But here it's more people behave in a more rational way. So they don't use emotions too much to conduct their behaviors. They behave more in a pragmatic way, and that's something I like. So something I like to explain to my friends, like I feel very lucky because I think I'm mixing both types. I kind of learn to manage my emotions in a better way, in a way that they do not affect me that much. Rather than that, I've learned to do things in a more logical, pragmatic way, and that has worked for me in many ways in my relationships, in my work, professionally, my daily life. That's something good. I have older friends, also Venezuelan friends, who have lived in China for several years, but perhaps their personality or the way they do is a different way. So I can feel like for them it's easier to get affected by circumstances like local things here. that might affect them in a different way. So I try to, give some advices to try to minimize these effects that it could have. But I think you should be more, use more the common sense and the logic, try to adapt more to where you are rather than let your feelings and your emotions lead your actions.
It's kind of the process of living in China has evened you out a little bit. You've kind of found a common ground between the two cultures.
Yeah, I would say I'm in that place right now, and I feel that that works good because I'm not too much of any side. I'm still Latino. I'm still enjoy dancing, hugging, spending time with my friends. But for us, that's is a big thing. Like socializing, parties, going out. It's a big portion of our culture. Right now, I see that I don't need that much of that. I need more of hard working, which is something very Chinese people here in China love to work. Like this is they believe that is the main purpose of your life. I will say that. So the main purpose of your life is study, graduate, find a job, make money, save money, buy a house. That's the end of the story. Here, buying a house is the top goal. Once you buy a house, if you can buy two houses, if you can buy three houses, even better. But at least one house. And that's the main purpose. And it's so different, it's so crazy when I was meeting like younger people and I was asking them like what do you like to do? Like I would expect something like, oh, I like to travel, I like to go to places, I would like to, I don't know, buy a computer or a car. These are like small goals that maybe young generations might have. Or right now, I don't know, maybe be famous. But here, that's not the goal. That's not the dream. Here, the dream is buy a house. So since they're very young, they get educated in a way like you need to work hard. If you can have two jobs, even better. If you can do overtime, even better because that means more money. Then you save money and you buy a house. So here's some people like it's normal perhaps in young people like they usually have work 5 days, 2 days off. They might find like a part-time job during those days off to make extra money
Wow.
so they
Okay.
can save faster and they can buy a house faster. So that hard work part, I've tried to absorb it a little bit somehow, not at that limit, not to like just work is my main purpose, but I believe now that hard work is a virtue, is something that you should do. Like yes, you should rest. It's all about balance. But I've know like I need to acknowledge that Latinos we're more chill, we're more relaxed. When it comes to work, and it's like uh, perhaps we like to be kind of optimistic. Oh, I lost my job. It's okay. I'll find another job. Or oh, you're getting late. You're going late to work. It's okay. Don't worry. It's not a big deal. Or you're going late for your date, or you meet your friends. It's like 5 minutes late, 10, 30 minutes late, 1 hour late. It's okay. Don't worry. Latinos were more chill.
Hmm.
I think that is not right at this point of my life, and I've learned that here. I feel like I'm more adapted now to the way Chinese people do things, and one of the reasons isn't just the fact that I'm living here, but I also look back the way things work, not just in Venezuela. I think in Latin America. I think when it comes to affection and love, is great. I mean, I love my background and my culture and my family, but I do believe that in general, people should try harder to do better. That's my conception. It's not anything against the way or the culture or anything, but I do believe, and it's something I tell my friends and my family a lot. I think people should try harder, like small things, like the fact that you will be late for an appointment. People tend to take it very chill, very casual, and people laugh about it like it's something, but it's something really important. The fact that you might be late for an appointment, you say a time that you set with your friends or like a meeting. If you be late, and it's really funny because we take it very casually. We're like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm late. Like it's not a big deal, but it certainly is. And now I realize that because before I was like that. And now when I have an appointment, when I travel back to my country, or I have a lot of friends living in Spain, my two brothers, they live in Barcelona. So I travel there quite often to hang out with them. And I know they will be late. So what I do is just I set our appointment for, let's say we're gonna meet at 3. I know that we'll arrive at 3:30. So I said the appointment is, I tell them just 3, but I know in my mind it's 3:30. So I'll be there. And even though I arrived 30 minutes late, uh, they're still not there yet. So it's like, it's a crazy thing. So this is perhaps minor things, but it's part of a way to illustrate the differences between the two cultures and the way we do things. And other than that, food, I've completely changed my food habits as well. I think people here eat way healthier. I'm trying to not eat any kind of processed food. For them, like cereals, cookies, cakes, sugar in general is something that's not part of their food habits. And I find that wonderful. Actually, this morning I was talking to one of my best friends. He also lives in Spain. And I sent him a picture of my breakfast because usually what I have for breakfast is all like steamed food, like some steamed veggies and maybe one egg, maybe one sausage. That's it. And he was like, "Oh, I just have a bowl of cereal with milk." I said, "Yeah, that's okay. I mean, if you enjoy it, but I just tell him the cons that he might have to eat something like that for breakfast, how it affects your mood later. It's all connected. I also drink perhaps less coffee and more tea. Before I was all about cold ice water. Now I am drinking more hot water because people here drink a lot of hot water. And even though, like, for example, when you feel sick, they try to avoid the first thing, the medicine, the Western medicine, like a pill or something like that, like a painkiller. I'm trying to up that way. Their medicine, the Chinese medicine, is slower and less doses. Like it's not that aggressive as Western medicine. So I'm trying to do it that way as well. Like usually, if you have a headache here, people say, "Oh, drink hot water." Like here, hot water is something they like to recommend for every single thing. If you feel tired, if you feel sick, hot water is like a miracle thing for them. So I think I've heard that so much that I'm drinking more and more hot water. Actually, I have like my cup that I take with me everywhere. Like people might think, "Oh, I have coffee there." Sometimes I do have coffee. I still have, like, I'm drinking coffee right now in the morning. I need coffee. But later I just switch to a tea or just hot water and drinking throughout the day. That has a lot of benefits that Chinese medicine explains, like through your body and then the way you split your energy throughout the day. There's a lot of explanations about it. But in that way, I've also kind of absorbed a little bit of their habits and their culture. And it's been beneficial, to be honest, especially when it comes to food, like less processed food and more natural, organic food, perhaps. I think I've seen some changes and some benefits in my body, my mood, the way I have energy throughout the day. All these things I think it's so beneficial, and I think it's the reason it's part. I'm living here in China.
I mean, that's cool that you've adapted so much to the point where you're like basically Chinese, or like leading a Chinese lifestyle. You mentioned earlier that like cultural integration depends a lot on the personality of the individual, and how some people are more adaptable than others, or they're more eager to accept changes, or they're maybe a little bit more flexible, just like in their personality or whatever that might be. I do think that plays a really big role. Like if there are like moving to another country will always have changes, but if you're motivated to accept those changes and just kind of roll with them, then you can adapt. If you don't have that kind of personality, or you can't adapt like on a personality like that, like if you can't kind of change, if that's not your default position, you're going to have a really hard time adapting to, I think, any culture, let alone a culture that's like, so different, like in China. It takes a lot of self-reflection to know what you're bringing with you from your own cultural bias. Like we all have our own bias, and when you live within your culture, you don't see it. It's like the fish doesn't see the water. This is just normal. This is just what it means to be human, right? And then you go to another country and you're like, oh, everyone does things differently. I took a lot of this stuff for granted. So it's cool that you're adaptable like that. And I can see that it's helped you a lot having that personality type, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm not going to do this. This isn't for me. That's not a part of my culture. I'm not going to partake in it. You can't go very far with that attitude, right?
Yeah, correctly. As I say, I have a few friends that I've met in the beginning. Like we actually, when I first came here, we were a group of a few friends, like 8 or 10 friends. We have a lot of common backgrounds. We all speak Spanish from different countries. Recently moved to China, and up to now, from that group of 8 or 10 people, I'm the only one who's still here. All of them already left for different reasons, not precisely because they couldn't adapt to the culture, but some of them were in that position where they were having a tough time at work, or when they were going outside and they were traveling. There was always a lot of complaining, a lot of friction between the way they do things and the way they were seeing people do things here. So yeah, personality is a big thing. That adaptability depends a lot on your take on it. Like if you're willing to accept and understand people do things in a different way. And China requires a lot of that. Perhaps in other countries, when things work in a different way, it could be easier, but China, it's challenging in every single way when it comes to food, languages, culture. The system here works in a different way as well. Like as I say, like the way you find a job, or the way you do things in general here works in a different way. I will say it's a little bit more restrictive somehow if you compare to the way people do things in the West. But there's also, you once you're here, you understand that's the only way things could work, because then later you see around, and you see, so like the quality of life here in general is pretty good. I've never been in a country safer than China. There's no crime at all here, at all. You feel safe 24 hours a day, and that's something that people will tell you, no matter if they adapted or not to China. People will agree on this. Things work in the right way here, like and just like that. Also, like the public health system, the public transportation, education. Many things are improving throughout the time. So my point is, once you're here and you understand that these kind of restrictions that many people actually complain about when they just see China from outside, actually are the reasons why the country works so well, and why they have improved so much, and why the country's positions right now as a second world largest economy, and it's improving, and it's just doing things in a better way. Because actually, because of my job, what I'm doing right now, making this video, I have also the opportunity to travel to many places all around China, big cities, small towns, rural areas, and I've seen some changes. I've seen some improvements, which are very positive. So I think in my position, I could have the ability to understand and see these changes. So culture, the way people behave, the way people do things, are one of the main reasons why China has achieved such a good level of development. But yeah, if somebody perhaps do not adapt, cannot take it, doesn't mean that person is wrong or China is right wrong. It's just a matter of your position towards that situation. You cannot accept, that's okay. You're free to go. You're free to stay, as long as you respect the things, that you come here with an attitude like, you're wrong. That's not the way to do it, and everything else is fine.
For people that have never been to China and might not know a lot about it, what would you say the biggest misconception is about the country?
Whoa, I think everyone could have a different take on this. I would say the biggest misconception comes to one word, and it's freedom. Like, people tend to know there are a lot extreme restrictions and limitations here when it comes to freedom, like freedom of speech, freedom of movement, all the different freedoms that people claim to, perhaps you might have more in Western countries. That is a big misconception, actually. It's true, there are, as I mentioned before, there are some restrictions here, but everything comes to the fact that they need to uh, find a balance in the way of the social behavior. Like China is coming from a very poor background with a very problematic background like several decades ago, and that is changing. So people tend to think that when they come here, they if they do something wrong, they might go to jail, they might kill you. I don't know. This is a lot of misconceptions towards the this government control over people, which is not true most of the time. As I say, I've been here for many years. I've never felt controlled, or I never felt limited or restricted or punished in any way that people might think. And in fact, I actually have like channels on the social media. I spread information. I criticize. I say what I think, and that's okay. Um, yeah, it is true. There are certain restrictions here. For example, they try to control a little bit like the violence on social media, the hate speech on social media as well. These kind of things are highly controlled here. Um, there's also true the fact that a lot of Western apps don't work here. Like for example, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, all Google services are blocked here. You cannot use them here. You need a VPN to use them. That's the way I use it. But that is okay. That is accepted. That's not illegal. So you can still use them. You can still post content. You can still do a lot of things here. As long as you don't go out of the right legal way, you will be fine here. And that is the main purpose of that. Like the government don't want people to commit crime. They don't want people to have guns. They don't want people to use drugs. But that's the right thing to do, right? Like nobody, I've never met anyone in the world that say you should have a gun, you should consume drugs. I don't think that that's right, and that's something they try to control. So the fact that there are a lot of restrictions towards positive, beneficial behavior of the society, people tend to like think that this is a bad thing. There is a lot of control or restrictions and punishment there, but the reality it's different. That exists. Those kind of restriction, controls, and punishment exist in that kind of situations where people are trying to break the law. If you come here and you don't want to break the law, you'll be okay. You'll be fine. People talk a lot about surveillance, for example, on your phone and the cameras and everything. Like, yeah, there are a lot of cameras everywhere. To be honest, for me, I feel that it's great. I feel so safe because there are cameras. Actually, cameras have helped a lot to reduce petty crime that happened a lot back in time. Like if there is like an accident, there's a way to monitor and track who had the fault for that accident. So these kind of camera systems all around the country, I believe that's super beneficial, and it guarantees a very good level of safety in general in the country. The phone, the fact that like I've heard a lot like here these apps are being tracked from the government, but I'll say I'm not doing anything wrong. Like that's my own take, that's my own perception, right? Like, and I always say I'm not doing anything wrong or illegal. I don't. If they have access, and it's like everywhere, even your phone in every country, government or big corporations, they do have access to your content or what you're doing or your messages or your pictures. They do have access that they know what you're talking about, and it's here true as well. They do know, but I have nothing. Don't have anything to hide. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just living my life. I'm just do what a regular person does. So if other people or corporations or governments have access to my information, I don't really mind. I don't really care if they do have access to this because I'm not doing anything wrong. So what they can find, just silly messages, pictures of my trips, messages with my friends. That's not anything wrong. So I have nothing to hide. The perception also it leads me to my next point. The perception of privacy here is way different from the West as well. Like this is something that in the West people tend to value a lot. Here is not a priority. People don't really care. And once again, to the social behavior, for example, It happens to me a lot of time at work. Like, Chinese people are very curious, especially when it comes to foreigners. So sometimes I was sending a message or typing a message, or like I see a picture on my phone on Instagram, I was laughing. They immediately will come to check on your phone. And if you're new to China and then you're doing that at work or with your group of friends, or you come to study here and they do that, you'll feel like they're violating your privacy, and you feel like, why are you looking at my phone, what are you doing? But they just come, they do it such a natural way, like that's a normal thing to do. Now I don't get offended. Like, actually, it happened yesterday. I was giggling, like I was checking something. I was like, haha, they just come here and they just check my phone. What is it, what is it, what are you checking at, what are you looking at? And that's normal for them. For us, it's not. Or like, it happens to me once at work. I was taking note of something. They're also very curious when you write something. They come and check, what is it? And it was during the first few weeks of living in China, I really got upset. And that person who did that couldn't speak English. In that time, my Chinese was zero level. So I found the manager and told him, like, hey, I'm taking note of something that is my private thing. Can you please explain her not to do that, because it's not the right thing to do. It's not her business, so she cannot come here and check my notes. And actually, the manager, he understood my position because he could speak English, and I saw her face and his reaction. He was kind of embarrassed trying to explain my position or my request to this other person, because for their culture that's something normal. If somebody comes to pick on your notes or your phone, that's not a bad thing. That's okay here to do. But again, it comes to our perception of privacy is highly valued. That, so it's somehow to illustrate how here in China people don't really care that much about this thing that we do care a lot, which is privacy or personal space. For example, it's normal, like in the public transportation here. I'm pretty sure you've seen. I don't know if have you been to China before?
Mm-mm, I haven't.
Yeah. So here, public transportation, peak hours, rush hours especially in downtown. It's not everywhere, but in the most popular areas, rush hours are like crazy for public transportation. So they will like push, and it gets really crowded. Or in general, just personal space is not that important, so they might just approach to you, not to show affection like we do, but just like in a normal way, just to get close to you or just pass by, or it's way different to the way it works in the West. So this is not a misconception, because that's true, that happens here. The privacy thing is not a big deal, but it's part of their culture. It's a reality here. So people might have some kind of issues when they come here and they face this kind of situation, like I did in the beginning. For me, that was a problem. But now I don't care, because I know if I laugh at something or I giggle, I just checking something, they may approach and check what I'm doing. And actually, I do it for fun. I do it on purpose, because it's like, yesterday I did it at work several times, and it's so funny, and they laugh about it. Like, I was checking something and I just made like, oh my god, that's incredible, and they get immediately super interested and curious to see what. So I close the window on my computer, and I just look at them, and they get like super pissed off, like, why you don't want to show me? And then I did it again and again, but they knew it was a joke. But I did it 3 or 4 times. So every single time I react like, oh my god, what is it? What is it? I want to see. And then just shut the window, or I just hide my phone and didn't show to them. It's like, it's something funny also, like when you go to supermarket or you go shopping, you walking on the streets and they tend to check on your bags. They always look at your bag, or they see what you have in your hands, because they're naturally curious. And that's something also for me was like a little bit like invasive in the beginning. Like, why you want to check on my bags, on my shopping, so my grocery shopping? But they always do it. And now what I do is, like, when I'm passing by, at work mostly, like if I have a box or a bag and somebody comes to me, I intentionally hide it right away. That will make them like 10 times more curious. And they just act like kids. They just go around to see what you have, but I just hide it from them. They just go around. So that creates like a funny situation, trying to, like, at the end make fun of it. For me, it's super funny, these kind of things now. But before, it was kind of like, yeah, they're invading my privacy, something like that. But now I don't really care that much.
I mean, that's something that I've noticed interacting with other cultures as well. that all of the terms, all of these kind of norms that we have in the world are subject to change. Like your example with surveillance, or not surveillance, privacy. What is our perception of privacy in one given country versus another one? And it's completely different. But it's not only privacy, right? It could be what's considered rude, what's considered nice, what's considered conservative, what's considered liberal, what's considered extreme. Anything is subject to change depending on where you are in the world. And it's a very kind of mind-bending idea that we're using the same words, but they have completely different meanings, you know?
Yeah, totally. Actually, a lot of these behaviors, as I say, people might consider them like super rude or yeah, invasive, and that happens a lot here in China. It's a big deal, especially for visitors. But yeah, it tends to change from one place to the other. For example, for us in Venezuela or the Latino, like personal space is not big of a deal. Like we are very affectionate people, so in that matter, I didn't care that much. But other things, for example, the fact people here in China smoke a lot, and I know in the States, I don't think they have any more the smoking rooms or smoking floors. That I think that's actually forbidden over there. But here, some hotels they still do have smoking floors or smoking rooms. And in big cities like the one I live right now, that is banned. You cannot smoke indoors. But small towns that because of my work, I tend to go quite often, is still quite shocking, even though after all these years seeing people smoking indoors. So you are in the lobby of a hotel and some people might be smoking and nobody will do anything about it. Nobody will say, hey, can you please go outside? Whereas here in Shenzhen, for example, if somebody does that happens to, any staff of the hotel will ask them kindly to please go outside and smoke outside. Same thing with the speaker of the phones. That is something that still, even though I do love China and I'm super adapted, there are some things that I'm still do not accept. Like, for example, this part of the speakerphone, that's really annoying.
Like talking
And
on a speakerphone in public?
yes, not just talking, they just watch videos and they use the social media like TikTok or Douyin, it's called Douyin here. They use it with super loud volume. That is rude, no matter where you are. That's something I'm not willing to take and accept. So I still do approach to them and very kindly ask them to lower down the volume. And I've done that thousands of times, and not even one single time they have react in a rude way. They always understand, accept it, and lower down the volume. And actually, there is a huge campaign all around the country because I think they're trying to improve in general their social behavior. So in the subway, you hear a lot of announcements asking people to kindly lower down the volume of their devices. And actually, here in the subways, there's always one security guard running back and forth in the train all day long to ensure the proper behavior, to correct this kind of, if there's an issue, he will take care of that. So if somebody uses speakerphone, the speaker on their phone, they will approach to them and ask them to lower down the volume. But I do it too. I do it too. Whereas Chinese people tend to avoid confrontation a lot. So they will not approach to someone else and ask them to lower down the volume. At least I would say 99% of these people will not do it. But in that matter, I'm still very foreign, very Venezuelan, very Western. But I still do approach them. Same with somebody smoking indoors. I will ask them to please just do it somewhere else. But the speaker thing is something that still annoys me quite a lot. So I tend to tell them, please lower it down because it's bothering not just me. I know a lot of people.
I mean, maybe it's different in Venezuela versus Colombia. But when I was in Colombia, I noticed that a lot of people use their phone without headphones, like a lot more than here. Like if you're in the it's also connected to people sending voice messages in Colombia. Mm-hmm. Like everybody does that, right? Like WhatsApp voice messages where they're like recording their voice and then listening to what the other person sent them. And that was also a new concept for me because in Canada, we really don't do that. Like we text or we call. Like before I went to Colombia, I don't know if I had ever sent a voice message in my life.
Oh, really?
And in
you don't send voice messages that much?
No. And maybe it's just me, but like with my friends and my family, no one ever did that or does that. And in Colombia, everybody does it all the time. And so I noticed that like if you're on a bus or something like that, everyone is always listening to the messages, and it's through their speaker, and then they're like talking into it and then listening and talking into it. So like not necessarily listening to music or watching videos, but definitely always like listening to something out loud. You know what I mean?
Yeah, here is also like that. In China, people tend to send a lot of voice messages. It's amazing. And for us as well, like with my family, I mostly communicate through voice notes, voice messages. And also with my friends in the groups, on WhatsApp groups or WeChat groups. I was always like, I will say 60 to 70% of our conversations are through voice notes, and here people does that too. So but here they use it a lot, the speakerphone. The difference is that if in Colombia or in Venezuela or any Latin country you approach to someone to ask them please lower down, probably there will be some confrontation. People will get upset and tell you, why you want me? It's my phone. It's like I'm free to do whatever. It's like people will not understand that, but here they will not do that. If I've approached, as I said, to many people, asked them kindly lower down the volume, and they did it right away. So that is a big difference. But I remember one case. I was in an airplane, and somebody was using their phone, the speaker, and the person next to that, or in the row behind him, ask that person to lower down the volume. That person didn't do it, and the other person reacted in a very aggressive way. He started yelling, and actually we hadn't taken off in that point, so all the cabin crew came and the captain came to see what's going on, try to solve the issue. um, and it's because that other person was not willing to accept it. No, the other person perhaps didn't lower down, or didn't lower down enough to please the other person. And then the other person who asked him to lower down reacted in a very aggressive way. He got really upset and said like, why you pretend like everyone else needs to hear your message or your sound? That's so rude and so disrespectful. He got a point. He was right. I agree with him. But perhaps the way he reacted was not the right way. But that's not the most of the people will do it that way. It was like very isolated case that I've seen here. But yeah, I think in general, Chinese societies is moving to a more uh, for a better social behavior in general when it comes to these kind of things like smoking, using the speaker phones, and it has a lot to do with government initiatives. I have to say it like that because a lot of this comes from government campaigns to invite people. It's not they're pushing them, it's not they're forcing them, it's a way to slowly do it. Like, for example, to that example I said, in the train, somebody who doesn't want to lower down the volume, that's not a crime. He's not going to get punished. It's actually a regulation. An officer or an agent can come to you, like, can you please lower down the volume? If you say no, if you don't want to do it, that's okay. But that's the norm. People probably 99% of the time will obey, will do it, will agree. So again, there are a lot of initiatives in general to try to move China to a more civilized society, to behave in a better way. And just like these, there are a lot of initiatives and changes and in general in China to make it perhaps a more livable country, more country like more friendly towards visitors. When they come here, they might feel like it's a nice country to visit. So that no matter, China is changing as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways that culture changes. I mean, culture is always changing anywhere. It's always developing and evolving and taking different forms. But culture can also change. You can also change culture purposefully, like what you're talking about with government incentives. You can kind of, what's the expression? Kind of like tip the scale and then change it like almost manually. Yeah, it's very interesting how like culture is always developing, always changing, and it's such a deep thing. There's so many different layers to it, and especially in China, it seems like it's just it's a country that's rich with cultural uniqueness. You know, like
Yeah.
you said that, you know, if you're from Venezuela and I'm from Canada, we have more in common than with someone from China. Probably they have a very unique culture and a very rich history, right, in the language and the food and, you know, a million other things. And so we could probably talk about this like in like for hours and hours and hours because it's such an interesting idea. But we should probably leave it here for now, and maybe sometime in the future we can have another call and go through some other cultural things in China as well. That would be really fun, actually.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Anytime. I think, yeah, yeah. As you say, China has a super rich culture, and in many ways, from food to language to customs, it's such a wide country. And the interesting thing is like this culture is not as similar or like homogeneous in just one place. Like China is so huge, and as I said in the beginning, there are like different regions and provinces that have their own unique culture or unique habits. They're so rich and unique in their own way that people might think, oh, China is just one type of food or one type of music or the way that they dress or like kung fu, and that's it. But there's way more than that. And I guess that's something you can only learn, see, and understand once you live in this country, or perhaps have some connection with some Chinese people. Yeah, but yeah, Chinese culture is really rich, very interesting. If you want to go deeper into that, for sure, I'm super open to have another conversation and talk more about it. Like China is a very interesting topic, no matter where you see it from, and that's something actually I'm trying to do throughout my videos, just focusing mostly in development, infrastructure, and technology, because I think that is such an interesting topic here in China. And that's what I'm doing actually through the videos I created for my YouTube channel. Try to show that because I think it's very exciting the changes also that China is going through regarding those topics. But yeah, anytime in the future, if you want to keep talking, keep the conversation, I'll be super happy to have a more conversation with you.
Absolutely. So if people want to check out your content, where can they find you?
YouTube, my channel is Rafa Goes Around. That's my main channel. I have another channel. I make content about technologies, Tech Me Around, like tech from short for technology, Tech Me Around. And I also created another channel in Spanish. It's called Rafa por el Mundo. It's like kind of Rafa Goes Around the World. And that's mainly where I make content. But I also use my Instagram a lot to share like stories and my trips. It's called Rafa Avedra, like Rafa, and then Avedra. That's my Instagram name. So yeah, I mostly share my content, my videos on these platforms. That's where you can just take a look.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this call, man. I really appreciate it. This was like super, super interesting to learn a little bit more about your story and about Chinese culture. So thank you for this.
Sure. Thank you as well for the opportunity. It's been also a very nice conversation and super nice to share a little bit of my experience here. Thank you for the window and the opportunity. Looking forward for the next chance to talk.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll do another one for sure, I think.